about today is investigation controlling body systems. So in this investigation, you'll read a scenario and determine what the stimulus message is and what the response message would be to that scenario. Read each scenario carefully. Remember that some will not have a stimulus message or a response message. Page 90 to 91 in your textbook will be helpful, which when we look at if you don't have your textbook with you, that would be the key science concept. So when you're in here trying to figure out what that would be this here. Key science concepts, stimuli, and responses while cooking. So it just gives you some more examples of that. Okay, so we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Okay, so for each thing in the investigation, you'll read this scenario. So you were walking barefoot and you step in some mud. What is the stimulus message? And so you pick what your stimulus message would be. And then scenario 1, again, you are walking barefoot and you step in some mud. What is the response message? So when you step in mud, what does your body do, or what do you do? Okay, do you yell yuck, you stand there, you move your foot away? Okay, so each one is kind of like that, where you'll have your scenario twice, and one you'll have the stimulus message, and then the next question will be the response message. Okay, and so we're going to talk about that. All right, okay. So I'll go here. So when we think about this, thinking about what we read about and what you guys did last week. So say a friend of yours says that your brain controls everything you do. So you can unmute yourself if you want to share your response, or if you want to just write it in the chat box, that's okay too. But do you agree or disagree with this statement? And like maybe why do you disagree or agree with this statement that your brain controls everything you do? Oh, hang on, my dogs are going to start barking. My husband just got home, so that's why my dog started barking. Sorry, guys. Okay. So what would you say is maybe your reasoning for that? Why would you maybe say that your brain controls everything you do, or doesn't control everything you do? What do you guys think? I'm just going to wait until somebody says something. So we'll just wait. You guys see my dog? She's back there. So does your brain control everything you do? My husband's over there shaking his head yes, like this. Okay, so yes. So as we're starting to say, I agree. Yeah, it does. Mackenzie even said without your brain functioning, what was it? Without your brain functioning right, you can't do anything. Yeah, that definitely is true. Yeah, most of us are agreeing with that. Would anybody not agree with this? Does anybody not agree with this statement? Maybe why you would think that you didn't agree with this statement? So most of us are saying that yes, we do agree with this, which I would say too, however, though, in your reading, like when you have a reflex, do you think your brain is really kind of controlling that, or does it only go up through to your spinal cord and then back to your body? So like when you think about, like for instance, when you touch something that's hot, okay, you touch something that's super, super hot, you immediately pull your hand away. Okay, so that is a reflex response. When you go to the doctor and they hit your knee with that little hammer thing, and your knee kicks forward, okay, that would also be considered a reflex response. So things like reflexes only have to go to your spinal cord, but not all the way to your brain. So that could be maybe an argument against that. Doesn't necessarily make it wrong saying that we are, but that is reasoning for it. Don't you dare shoot me with that. Husband was pointing a Nerf gun at me. He's going to shoot me with it. Okay, so the nervous system includes your brain, your spinal cord, and your network of nerves. And just like every body system that we have, they all have those different levels of organization. They have cells, they have tissues, and things like that. So in the nervous system, so that would obviously, the organism is us, right? The body system is the nervous system. Okay, the next level down would then be your organs, right? So those would be things like your brain. That would be your spinal cord, okay? And your spinal cord and your brain are made up of those tissues, which is your nervous tissue, okay? So then that nervous tissue is made up of your those cells, which are neurons, okay? And in your book, it has a really awesome diagram of what a neuron looks like and how that works. So in your notebook, you were supposed to draw an image of a neuron and kind of show the direction that the signal would be traveling from one neuron to another. Right, and so there's like the dendrites, which are like the little branch parts, the cell body, which is the main part of it, and then the axon, which is what carries the signal from the dendrites to the other end of the neuron to be passed on to the next. Okay. So what the nervous system does is it gives you some different responses to whether internal or external responses, changes. Okay, so that would be considered a stimulus. So a stimulus is a change in the internal or external environment that causes the nervous system to react. And so like when we're talking about that response with the hand and touching something in like this hot stove, the stimulus message is your hand feeling hot, right? And that sends a message up your arm to your spinal cord. It doesn't have to go all the way to your brain because then it immediately goes back because that's a reflex. And the response message is you pulling your hand away from that. Okay. Another example would be like if you were playing soccer. Okay. The stimulus message is the ball hitting your foot, and then your response, and that sends that message from your foot all the way up your leg to your spinal cord, up to your brain, and your brain sends a response message back down your spinal cord, down your leg, to your foot to kick the ball towards the goal. Okay, so that would be a voluntary response, whereas the other one is with the hand is an involuntary response. Morgan actually had a really good question the other day where she asked me, would running be considered a voluntary or involuntary response, or would it be considered both? And she had a really good argument for why it would be considered both. You know, if you're running because you feel like you want to exercise, that would be a voluntary response. But if something scares you, right, maybe you have this involuntary response to start running away from that because that's your fight or flight reflex, right? So that would be a really good example of something being both. Okay, awesome. So your body has these different sense receptors, which you guys are pretty familiar with already, right? Those would be your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and your tongue. And also your skin is also technically a sense receptor. So when we think about our sensory receptors, these are just specific kinds of sensory neurons that detect and are activated by stimuli from outside or inside the body. Okay, so you have three different types. You have mechanical receptors, you have chemical receptors, and you have light receptors. Okay, so mechanical receptors, these are things that respond to movement, and so like These are all found all over your body. These are found inside your body, outside your body. So like your stomach, when you feel like after you've eaten a big meal, right, that and your stomach, you feel full, right, that is a mechanical receptor. Your stomach has expanded and is now giving you that feeling of fullness. Touch is definitely a mechanical receptor. Anytime you run into something or feel like the wind even, that is a mechanical receptor. Your ears, hearing. So hearing is technically also a mechanical receptor, okay, because you have little hairs that are all the way inside your eardrum that detect the vibrations of sound waves. And so that's how you actually can hear. Okay, you have chemical receptors. Okay, so your chemical receptors are in your nose so that you can smell, and then on your tongue for your taste buds, so you can taste those different things. So that's why you can taste things differently. And when you have like a stuffy nose, you are like sick and you can't taste or as well or smell as well. It's because you've got that sickness. And right, we know that when something isn't working properly, it affects other things. And so when you're sick, it affects your senses. And so it's affecting those chemical receptors. You also have light receptors, which help you see. Okay, so you have two types of light receptors in your eyes, which are the rods and cones. You've probably heard of those before, and you also read about them. So the rods in your eyes pick up dim light and motion, and your cones help you see color. So if you're colorblind, you have a genetic disorder that affects the cones of your eyes in seeing certain colors. Okay. Yeah, so then we also want to think about our memory, learning, thoughts, and emotion, which is section 5 in your textbook. Okay, so you have the hippocampus, which is in your brain, part of the brain, that affects all of those things, the way that your memory, your learning, and then your thoughts and your emotions. So people that have damage to their hippocampus have trouble creating new memories, they have trouble learning things, they have issues with their emotions. So a lot of the times if people, like for instance, get in a car accident or in like a really bad any type of trauma to the brain, really, you'll have to relearn how to walk or relearn how to talk, and things like that. But this is where it stores all of those memories for you. And there's those two kinds of memories, the short-term and the long-term memories. Okay. So again, I do think that if you want to get on page 90 and 91 in your book, or like I said later, you can also, if you don't have your book, you can use the online textbook, and it will be the key science concept. Okay, so when we think about stimuli and responses while cooking, okay, so that's kind of what the assignment today is for, is determining what the stimulus is and then determining what the response would be to that stimulus. Okay, so stimuli and responses have a cause and effect relationship. A stimulus might cause a sensory receptor to respond by sending signals to the brain. So like when you feel something hot, that's sending a signal, but okay, back towards your brain, since that is a reflex response, that would only have to send it back to your spinal cord. Okay. So the brain responds to the signals, and the effect will be behavior, memory, thought, or emotion. So in the case of, touching something that's hot, your behavior is moving your hand away, and you also create a memory that the stove is hot, and you learn that you don't just go touching the stove anytime. Okay, so some stimuli, like heat, activate pain receptors in the skin. Responses to these stimuli result in reflex responses that do not need to be sent to the brain for immediate action. Okay, so like I said, the touching something hot is an involuntary response that does not have to send a signal all the way back to your brain, but with the case of like kicking the ball, that would send a signal all the way back to your brain. Okay. All right. I know it's kind of a lot of me